I think we pretty much covered chapter 2. So chapter 3 is short. Chapter 3 is when Hosea goes back to buy Gomer back from the slave block.
Yes.
To buy Gomer back from the slave block. You know, sometimes some people, they got to go to the very rock bottom before God can get their attention. Then said the Lord unto me, Go yet love a woman beloved of her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord towards the children of Israel, who look to other gods and love flagons of wine. Despite her sin, despite her disposition to sin, God still loved her. God still cared about her. He still was concerned about her. And he was concerned about Israel also. He said, according to the love of the Lord. So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver and a half homer of barley. So this verse right here is very similar to the 30 pieces of silver that were spent, that were given to Judas in exchange for Jesus. 30 pieces of silver, yes.
You said chapter 2.
Chapter 3.
Okay, you said 2.
I'm sorry. We're in chapter 3. Verse 2. We pretty much covered chapter 2. Chapter 3, verse 2. If I misspoken, I apologize. So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver and for a homer of barley and a half homer of barley. The price of a slave was 30 pieces of silver. And so we see Hosea here, he's scraping together everything he can to buy her back, right? And in these next few verses, there's also this insinuation that he might have even been like making installment payments to try to get her off the block, right? So you hear that there's in the next coming verses, like there was a period while he had to wait until he had paid everything off, but she was taken off the slave block. And so you see this 15 pieces of silver is the half price paid in silver. Then you have a homer of barley, which was 10 pieces of silver, and a half homer of barley, which was 5 pieces of silver. Total price 30 pieces of silver. Yeah, why would he not say a homer and a half of barley? He says a homer of barley and then a half homer of barley. It's almost like, okay, look, I want to pay her, I want to get her out of this situation. I just can't do it all right now, so I just pay in pieces.
Wow.
We don't know that for sure, but there's an insinuation of that. And I said unto her, Thou shalt abide for me many days. Thou shalt not play the harlot, and thou shalt not be for another man, so will I also be for thee. That there was this idea of like there was this layaway place. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without a teraphim. King and priest, kings of the high level, the princes are the lower local levels. He talks about sacrifices without an image, and then he talks about the ephod and the teraphim, right? The ephod was the instrument that God gave to Israel, and the teraphim was the gods of the Balaam. So he's saying you're not going to have a godly sacrifice. You're not even going to have an ungodly sacrifice. You won't have either, because that's the way they were. They were two-sided. They tried to do both things. Afterwards shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and shall fear. Again, like I said, you see the king and the prince. There's the godly king, and then there's the worldly princes. Satan's called the prince and the power of the air. So you're not going to have any God. You're going to be godless. You're going to be without the God of this world and the God of heaven. That's kind of what he's hinting at there. And the Lord their God and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. That's the end of chapter 3. And that basically covers the physical reality, marriage, and situation between Hosea and Gomer. Now we go into these prophecies and how he takes that illustration and uses it as an edict against Israel or Ephraim. You'll hear Ephraim a lot in these readings, but he's talking about the northern kingdom of Israel, which would be separate from, like I talked about, the kingdom of Judea, which was Judea and Benjamin. Chapter 4, we start going into God making an edict against Israel. So you have to look at this from a legal perspective, from a loving perspective and a legal perspective. Because God is both. God is loving and caring, and He wants to help people, but on the other side, He's a God of the law and of order, and He can't break that. And so how does He measure both of those together? And so this is kind of like how this whole conversation goes. It's also described as a lawsuit. It can be broken down into like 5 parts. There's the divine indictment, where God brings a controversy here in verse 1. He talks about the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants. And then the breakdown of society, where these people's sins not only affected themselves, but it also affected the natural world. That God had cursed the land, and He had cursed the animals, and He had cursed... And just because we think we're an island to ourselves, but our behavior affects everything around us. Right. And then there's the corrupt leadership. He talks about the corrupt leadership. We talked about that in general when we covered the whole book overview. We talked about the priests were looking to get the people to sin so that they could get more sacrifices. So the leadership was corrupt. And then we have a warning to Judah, where, He's like, hey, southern kingdom, take note of what's going on in Israel. Because you can be just as susceptible as they are. You can fall to the same things. Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel. For the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, no mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. We talked about this word knowledge, which is a similar word or same word as the word where God says Adam knew Eve, right? Or in the verse where He said, in that day you shall know good and evil, the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, the yada, right? Knowledge, not just brain knowledge, but intimate knowledge. Adam knew Eve. We know what that means. It means they came together as a husband and wife. And so they're lacking this intimate knowledge of God because they won't give themselves over to God personally. Oh, they knew about God. They knew about His laws. They knew about the sacrifices. They knew about the rules. They knew about the motions. But they didn't know God personally. And He said, and so this kind of breaks down because it's just like the children. You're not my people. There's no mercy. I'm going to scatter you. Jezreel means to scatter. And lo ruhama means no mercy. And lo amin means not my people. And so this is very similar. If you don't know God, then how can you be merciful to your neighbor? And if you can't be merciful to your neighbor, how do you even know what's right and wrong, the truth, right? So it's all connected. And as a matter of fact, you're going to see as we go along how that this very basic element of not having an intimate knowledge of Christ or an intimate knowledge of God leads all the way through sin and everything. It's basically the slippery slope. When you say, well, I'm going to stay good. I'm going to be a good person. A lot of people like to think this. I'm going to be a good person, but I don't need God. That's totally not true.
Oh, right.
Once you abandon that intimate relationship with God, there's no boundaries.
Right.
Everything goes downhill from there. And so we'll see that even again in some of these other verses. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery. What is the outcome of a godless society? Cursing, bitterness, can't keep any contracts with people, lying, killing, and stealing, and committing adultery. All the bad things that could happen. And then it says they break out. It means they're busting at the seams with sin. We're not talking about just like, oh, oops, I did this or whatever.
Right.
It's like, no, this is now the new norm. Sin is the new norm in the nation. And he says blood touches blood. What is he saying? He said one sin rolls right into another sin. The blood of one murderer is rolling right into the blood of another murderer. Right? That the sin is just breaking out like a plague. It's unstoppable. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelt therein shall languish. With the beasts of the field, with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. And God created Adam and Eve in the garden. He said, I give you dominion over the earth, and over the beasts of the field, and over the fowl of the air, and over the fish of the sea, and over everything that creepeth upon the face of the earth. I give you rulership over all these things. And here in verse 3, we see that because of their sin, it spreads out to the entire dominion of the world. And it causes everything to suffer. It causes the world to suffer. It causes the animal kingdoms to suffer. Yet let no man strive nor reprove another, for thy priests are as they that strive, for they are they that strive with the priests. Hey, don't be upset when somebody does something wrong to you, because you're all doing wrong amongst each other. Don't come crying to God saying, hey, this person did me wrong, when you're doing wrong to other people. Right? It's like, how do you expect me to hear your plea, to hear your cause, if you are doing the same thing to your fellow man? Therefore that shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night. I will destroy thy mother. The people were going to fall. God had placed judgment on the people, and they were going to fall in the day. It was immediate, the day it's going to happen. And then he says the prophets shall also fall at night. And so what were the prophets for? The prophets were there to show them what God has shown them, what they see. Right? When you're in the night, you can't see. It's dark. Right? And that's what he's hinting at, is that the prophets aren't going to see anything because they're in the dark. Right? And they're going to die. My people are destroyed. This is the key verse of basically the whole book. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Again, that yada, that dot. Yada is the verb. Adam knew Eve, right? Da is like the knowledge. So knowing is a verb. Knowledge is a noun. This is what he's talking about, the noun version of the word. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Again, not just brain knowledge, but intimate relationship with God. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, rejected that intimate relationship with God, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt no more preach to me. Seeing that thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. That there's repercussions for breaking your covenant relationship with God. Verse 7, as they were increased, so they sinned against me, therefore I will change their glory to shame. You see, they were living in sin. They were having a good time. They saw financial benefits from sin. They saw their lives going, quote unquote, good. So they were celebrating. Hey, everything's going good. What do I got to worry about? They were glorying in their shame. Yes. And he said, I'm going to stop that. I'm not going to allow you to continue to celebrate sin. They eat up the sins of my people and they their iniquity. We talked about this before, about how the priests wanted the people to sin so that they would get more sacrifices. There shall be like people like priests, and I will punish them for their ways and to reward them their doings. That it was downhill. It was you've heard trickle down in economics. This was trickle down non-relationship with God. That the priests wouldn't stand up and say anything to the people, and they would appease them. You know, as soon as Moses was gone, they came to Aaron, and Aaron said, I'll make you a calf, right? So they were looking for someone that would get them off the hook of having to serve God anymore. And he said, if the leaders abandon God from you, then it's all downhill from there. For they shall eat and not have enough, they shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed to the Lord. They're not going to be satisfied no matter how much they get. They're not going to be satisfied. You're never satisfied. You always want more. Yeah. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. They were living in revels. They were living in parties. And it took away their ability to have a relationship with God. My people ask counsel at their stocks, and their staff declare unto them, for the spirit of whoredom hath caused them to err, and they have gone a-whoring from under their God. Stocks and staffs were instruments of idolatry. They were going to these other gods for answers. Their sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burnt. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredoms, and your spouses shall commit adultery. The shadows thereof is good, meaning it felt good. It means that, hey, I don't feel any shame. I don't feel any bad about this. I'm comfortable right now. Everything's comfortable. I've got what I need. I've got income. I've got everything's covered. Right? They had this false sense of security. This false sense of pleasure. Though thou, Israel, play the harlot, yet not Judah offend. Now he's cautioning Judah. He said, take a look at Israel, because what's happening to Israel can happen to you.
Right.
And come ye not unto Gilgal, neither go ye up to Bethaven, nor swear the Lord liveth. I had something here about Gilgal and Bethaven. I wonder if I can find it. And if I find it, I'll show it to you. But there is something particular about those two places. They were strategic places. For Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now the Lord will feed them as a lamb in a large place. So, talking about backsliding is not slipping and oops, I fell. That backsliding is resisting and pushing and kicking away physically. It's not, ooh, I backslid, I fell. No. It's more like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to obey. That's what backsliding is. Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Meaning, there's no hope for him.
Wow.
Israel and Ephraim are synonymous. He's saying he's joined himself to idols. He's kind of trying to show Judah what not to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, let him alone. I've already judged him.
Wow.
Don't become like him. You know, a lot of people, when certain things happen in certain people's lives, and I'm not saying this about anybody or now or any circumstance, I'm just saying in general, that when God is done with somebody, that you know that they're just done. There's nothing you can do about it.
No, sir.
Their drink is sour. They have committed whoredom continually. Her rulers with shame do love give ye. Their drink is sour. It's turned into vinegar. It's corrupted. The wind hath bound her up in her wings, and they shall be ashamed thereof. There shall be ashamed because of their sacrifices. The wind, the whirlwind, the hurricane.
Yes.
None of us can stand outside and rebuke the whirlwind, rebuke the hurricane. Well, Jesus can.
Yes.
He say, be calm, be still.
Absolutely.
But we can't do that. When God sends the hurricane's not going to answer you and say, oh, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And that's what he was saying to these people. It's like, you can't talk back to the whirlwind when it comes to destroy you. What time do we have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. So, we talked about knowledge. That's chapter 4. We covered like 3 and 4. I want to see if there's maybe something else we can put in here.
Ephraim. You made mention of Ephraim.
Ephraim is synonymous with Israel.
I'm sorry. Gilgad and.
I wonder if I can find that note on Gilgad and see if I can find it, but I don't think I will. It might not be the notes I have. Let's go over some of these vocabulary words real quick. In chapter 1, we saw the word controversy. That is the Hebrew word rib, which is a legal term. It means a lawsuit, a formal case. This is not just God just speaking his mind. He's bringing a legal case against them. Then in verse 1, we see the word mercy, which is the Hebrew word chest. It means steadfast covenant and love, loving kindness. We talked about da and yada, which is in verse 1 and verse 6. And then another key word in this chapter is Zannah, which is the whoredom and harlotry. Word appears to describe spiritual adultery, emphasizes Israel's pursuit of idols. Wasn't just by a mistake. It wasn't just a mistake that they were serving these idols. They were purposely serving these idols. Continuously. It was a betrayal. That's another word that you'll find when we go on in chapters 5 and on, that there's this theme of treachery. This theme of treachery. That you've dealt treacherously. That you have absolutely stabbed God in the back. by having these dual loyalties, to trying to have a dual loyalty to the world and a dual loyalty to God. We always talk about you can't ride the fence, right? But this is the nitty gritty of you can't ride the fence, right? Because that's what Israel was trying to do. They were trying to ride the spiritual fence. They were trying to appease the gods of Balaam and appease the God of Israel at the same time. And they thought and this goes into that whole mentality of witchcraft, the mentality of I can control God by mechanics. Yes. That if I just pray the right prayer, or if I just injunction His name, that certain things will happen. And again, you have to look at this, because what is the major overall word of this whole book is the yada, the knowledge. God later on, He talks about, I'm not looking for sacrifices. Yes. I'm looking for praise from your lips of honesty and reality in your life. These people knew the rules. These people knew the book and its liturgy and what should or shouldn't be done. And they thought that as long as we follow these rules, we're okay. And God's like, no, what I want from you is a relationship. I want you to not just know about me, but to know me and have a relationship with me like a man and a woman would have a relationship in marriage. A commitment, a loyalty, an intimate relationship with God where you're like, Lord, I want to get to know you. I want to know how, I want to be pleasing to you. And seeing God as a person and not just a bunch of rules. That's what He's trying to say here. These people, they saw marriage. Gomer saw marriage as like a way for her to basically get some income from a dude, right? A security. Hosea was like a security blanket for her that she could lean on while she went and sinned, right? And that's exactly how God saw Israel. You see me as some kind of security blanket that you can just lean on. And it goes really into this a lot, about this mentality of, I can just run back to God whenever I want to. He's full of mercy. I can just go back and run. You're going to see that later on. Right? It's the same mentality. It's like we see God as like this, well, he's got to be good because His Word says that or whatever. And God's like, you can't treat me like that. I'm a person. Right? And I'm not fooled by your superficial idea. Like you think you're going to pull the wool over God's eye. That's the mentality that's going on in this book. So, sir, did you want to discuss this in prayer, sir?